Hi, I'm Jacqueline.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes. Off to a great start. We'll see how long this lasts. Maybe this just a really long espresso?
Yeah,
How
Courtney's just gonna take
sick.
over and tell this entire story herself. I'm sorry.
I mean, I could. I've been deep diving. I've been in the trenches with this one, so
Well, I'm like getting over a cold and I was doing pretty good. And then literally like 20 minutes before we started recording, my cough will not go away. And I was
yeah.
doing good the last like few minutes that we were talking. And then as soon as I said my name, it just was like, nope, we are here.
Yeah.
Um, but I do have something to talk about, Courtney. So
Okay.
we're gonna return to PB&J Gate. Okay, so we're gonna have a PB&J
Mm-hmm.
Gate part two. So
Okay.
as I mentioned, I've been sick this week. So as you do when you just like mindlessly scroll because you can't concentrate on anything else, so you just kind of fuck around on the internet, you know?
Mhm.
So I found this discussion where this guy was saying that him and his wife were arguing about the correct way to make a PB&J because he's saying you put the peanut butter on one slice of bread and the jelly on the other and then you put them together. And she's like, "No, you put peanut butter on both sides and then put jelly on one and then put it together." And a lot of people were like, "Yeah, and like it keeps the jelly from like getting the bread soggy or like sliding out of the bread." And I'm just like,
I've never in my life heard that.
I've never in my life heard of anyone that double peanut butters their PB&J.
Wouldn't that kind of throw off your peanut butter ratio? Because then wouldn't you need to put jelly on
Exactly.
both sides?
But no, apparently you don't. Apparently you
Like
just put the jelly on one side.
I would understand if people are like, I do peanut butter and jelly on both sides, like peanut
Okay,
butter, jelly,
yeah,
jelly. I'm like, okay, I get that. But like
yeah.
just jelly on one side?
Because like the people who were like pro just one
Also,
on one,
what jelly are they using that it makes the bread soggy? I've never had this issue in my life.
or how much jelly are they using? I mean, maybe that's the
I
problem.
mean, obviously sometimes it's kind of hard to spread. Like when you get the
Yeah,
clumps, you're kind of like
trying
trying to
to.
get in there. But I've never been like, oh, now the bread is soggy.
I guess it depends on how long you're saving your PB&J. Because I mean, if you're making it at like 5 a.m. and you're not eating it till like 2
True.
p.m., then maybe it's
That's
pretty
true.
soggy at that point.
I also use sunflower butter, and that shit is runny. If I put that on both
Mm,
sides, it would be everywhere.
you just have a very messy sandwich. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I'm not opposed to like a double peanut butter because like I like peanut butter, but I'm just like, I never in my life would have like thought, hey, this is a good idea. But also, are there people who like put peanut butter and jelly on one side and then just put the bread on top? Is that a
Mm,
thing?
maybe.
Another question for you. When you're making a burger, what order does everything go in?
Okay, so mayo first because you use a knife for mayo.
Okay.
And then I usually do like ketchup, mustard, don't really care whichever way they go.
Uh-huh.
Usually on one side, this is if I'm like making a burger at home.
Yeah.
Usually on one side I put jalapenos.
Okay.
And then if I have like lettuce, tomato, I'll put it like probably on the other side and then patty and then I like dump it. But I don't have like the lettuce has to go on top bun or bottom bun. I just try
Mm,
not to make it all, I try to make it even
I
where
gotcha.
like the burger's like the patty's kind of in the middle and
Yeah.
not, you
Okay.
know.
So if you are making, okay, if you don't have a cheeseburger, but you're putting cheese on your burger, you know what I mean? It's like you didn't cook the
Mhm.
cheese on the burger. Do you put your cheese on top or on bottom? Or do you just always make a cheeseburger or have no cheese?
I always make a cheeseburger. I always let that cheese melt in the pan when I make it because that's
Do you ever, but if
or
you're having a
so
leftover burger,
I
do you
would
still just
then
do a cheeseburger or do you
I
just heat
would
it
then
up in the
put it on a
pan?
separate plate. I would heat up the burger and then a separate plate for a minute and then put the cheese on for 30 seconds or
Okay,
how much ever. I
I
like the
gotcha.
cheese melted
Yeah,
personally, but even if I don't melt the cheese, I usually just put it on the burger, which
I
doesn't really
gotcha.
make sense, I guess, but that's where I put it.
I don't know. I always put my cheese under the burger. So I'll do like the bottom bun and then I'll do ketchup, mustard, cheese, then my burger. And then on the other side is like tomatoes, pickles,
Yeah.
anything else. Yeah.
This just makes me think of those games you would play as a kid. That's like you pretend like you're in a restaurant and you have to like make people's food, and it would be like bun, patty, lettuce, bun, patty, tomato. And you had to like make them to serve them. Overcooked. Kevin and I started playing that on the Switch
Oh my
recently. We kind
gosh.
of have to make the different ones, but
Or you mean all day, every day with my 3-year-old who brings me every possible food combination you can
Yeah.
imagine? She'll make me a soup with fish and an orange and a watermelon and a sausage, and I'm like, delicious.
Oh,
Thank
that is
you. Just
disgusting.
so good. All right. Well, we do have a couple of updates before we get into today's
Mhm.
episode. I didn't look up details of this one. Courtney did
It's
this. I
okay.
just kind of,
I know the details for
Okay.
all of our updates because they were just in my brain. But I
Perfect.
was just going to talk about the Tyreek Hill
Yeah.
incident that happened week one of the NFL before the Dolphins game. Did you see the body cam footage that came out?
No, I only know that he was arrested for speeding like right outside the stadium, so a bunch of people saw it, but I don't know
Okay.
like
I will have to send it
details.
to you after this
Okay.
because blood boiling. People like are calling for this officer to be fired and he should be fucking fired.
Oh my God.
Because literally I thought cops were trained to de-escalate situations, not
Uh-huh.
okay. So basically it sounds like he was speeding, which
Hmm.
obviously like not great. But then I guess like he was in his car and like him and the officer were like kind of like going back and forth, you know? And then, so Tyreek then like rolls up his window and
Hmm.
the cop starts banging on his window. He's like, roll down your window, roll down your window. And he rolls down the window. He was like, roll down your window again. I'm going to pull you out of this car and like arrest you. Actually, you know what? No. And he lifts his car up, pulls Tyreek out of the car, puts him on the ground, puts him in handcuffs
Oh my
over that,
God.
over rolling his window up, which obviously like probably not great, but like
Yeah,
in the grand scheme of things, like this is what you're choosing violence over today.
exactly.
So then, like, they get him out of the car. Like, he's on the phone with someone. They hang up the phone. They like literally hang up his phone that's on the ground, which I'd be like, don't touch my personal shit. But also, then like he's standing up and they want him to sit down. And so he's trying to sit down and go slowly. And he's like, I just had surgery on my knee. I just had surgery on my knee. And this cop comes and like tackles him to the ground,
Oh my
like
God.
shoves him on the ground when he's in handcuffs. He's like
Yeah.
complying. So then another player pulls up. And so Tyreek's just like, call Drew, who's like his agent. He's like, call
Uh-huh.
somebody, call somebody. So they pull up and the guy gets out of the car and the cop is like, get out of here, move your car, move your car, move your car, give me your ID, give me your ID. And he's like, dude, I'm leaving. He's like, I'm gonna arrest you too, screaming at this guy
Oh my
who's just standing
gosh.
there. I'm
Yeah,
like, I thought cops were trained to de-escalate.
exactly. It's like, why are you
And
trying
he
to make the
escalated
situation
that
worse?
situation because like
Yeah.
because Tyreek rolled his window up and you were pissed about that?
Because he's on a power trip and he's just like, let me do
Literally.
whatever I can make this man do.
And it's just, it brings up the conversation. And I know it's kind of been brought up of like, how many men does this happen to? How many black men does this happen to who aren't Tyreek Hill, who don't have an agent, who don't
Yup.
have money, who don't have all of this, and don't get as much press coverage on this? Like, how many other black men, black women, anybody have these cops done this to because they're on a fucking power trip? It's it's ridiculous and it's just again bringing to light like all of these issues. Like if you the video made my blood boil because I'm like, yo, you should be like, hey, please don't roll your window up at me again. I really don't want this to like calm down in that situation. Don't just throw someone on the ground and there's all these other cops just going with him,
Hmm. Yeah, it's
going with
like
him.
you should be the calm one in this situation. I don't.
Yeah. Even if Tyreek Hill's mouthing off,
Yeah.
because he was just kind of on the ground. He was like, "That's fine. Take me to jail. I'll be out. I'll make bail. I'll
Right.
make bail." Like,
He's like, okay.
okay,
He's like, I got
cool.
places to be today. Okay. And they'll get this figured out.
Yeah, and then he kind of did his celebration with his hands being handcuffed, which
Yeah, I did
was a
see
little
that.
funny. But just again, it brings up the conversation of
Yep.
can we get the cops in fucking check?
Yeah. Like if this happens to someone of that like fame, and
Mm-hmm.
then of course we also wanted to talk about the recent shootings that are very timely for this episode as well. Unfortunately, always fucking timely
Yeah.
because we live
Mm-hmm.
in the great old United States of America, but
Yeah, just I kind of felt like, especially with the nature of this episode, we kind of had to
yeah.
bring up these two shootings that happened. One happened in Georgia at Appalachia.
Hmm.
Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia. Two students and two teachers were killed in a shooting. I'm not going to say the shooter's name because I don't want to give them
Yep.
any press. But it's kind of seeming like another one where a parent might get charged
Hmm.
also because
Another one,
quit giving your 14-year-olds guns.
especially
I
your
don't
14-year-olds who have demonstrated mental health issues and seeking help that they're not getting, and then, yeah, let's just buy them a gun.
yeah. 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 And then also there was at the time of this recording, this one will come out a little, hopefully by the time this comes out, this man has been caught. But there was the shooting in London, Kentucky, where a man just woke up one day, texted his, I think it was his girlfriend or someone saying, "Hey, I'm gonna go kill some people today." Went and bought an AR-15, went and bought like 2,000 rounds of bullets, same day, bought them, walked out, and then just started shooting cars on I-75.
Which is just insane.
And he had been charged in February for terroristic threatening and was still able to buy that gun same day, no waiting period, nothing. Um, if that man wanted to have an abortion, he'd have to wait 48 hours and see pictures of dead babies and all that shit. But
And live in a state that even allows it to begin with, because
yeah.
depending on where you are, that may not be an option to you at all.
Yeah, but you can just go buy an AR-15 same day. Literally assault rifle. um,
I think that's what's so
so
frustrating is that, like, so many times when this happens, people are like, oh, but what would gun laws have done if the person purchased this legally and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, there are so many instances like this where it's like, there are plenty of things that would have
it could have
stopped
given the
them.
person who got the text that the guy said, "I'm going to go kill people today," time to maybe actually report it before he was just able to get a gun and shoot at people. Thankfully, I
Yeah.
don't think anyone died. I think it was said like 12 cars were shot, maybe more. Maybe people don't even realize that they might have
Yeah.
damage somewhere. Five people were injured, a few of them severe. I think at least one person was actually shot in the face,
Oh
and
my
he's currently
God.
just on the run
Yeah.
in Kentucky. Don't know where he
Crazy.
is, just hiding somewhere. So just
Mm.
a crazy world we live in.
It is. It is. And as we will see, it's been happening for a very long time because
Yeah.
people like to say that this is new, and it's like this is not new.
No.
It's getting worse, but this is not new.
Yeah, it's yeah. Yeah, well, we're gonna get into a sad one. It doesn't get happier from here.
Yeah. Nope.
I don't yeah. All aspects of this story are just sad. But
Yeah.
so our sources for this week are Crimes of the Century episode. It's season one, episode one, DC Sniper. The You're Wrong About podcast. So they did a four-parter on on the DC snipers. It was very, very informative and a lot more detail. If you want a lot more detail, especially about our two suspects, um, like I mean, three of the episodes are about the people who basically did the DC snipings. Um, Very, very informative, very detailed. So took some from that the like main person, I'm pretty sure read like seven books that are like hard to access, like very, very well researched. But also very heavily focused on kind of the DC snipers themselves. But really great if you want more info on this topic, I would recommend going to listen. The John D. Rogers Law website, an NBC News article, WBAL-TV article, the Find a Grave website, and what the hell is this? And the WTOP News, an article from them. In October 2002, the Beltway area was terrorized by a sniper who was shooting people at random. So the Beltway includes suburbs of DC as well as like areas in Virginia and Maryland. This was only 13 months after 9/11 and soon after the anthrax scare. So a lot going on in DC around that time. And the area was traumatized by this frantic shooter, and the community was shocked to hear who the actual DC snipers were. So on October 12th, 2002, at 5:20 p.m., a gunshot crashed through a Michael's craft store in Aspen Hills, Maryland, but nobody was hit. So the gunshot went through the store, but thankfully nobody was hit. An hour later, at 6:30 p.m., a 55-year-old government analyst, James D. Martin, was shot and killed at a Shoppers Food warehouse in Wheaton, Maryland. So James Martin was a father, Boy Scout leader, and church trustee. He would frequently volunteer to be a judge at the local high school's science fairs, and he was actually purchasing grocery for his church's youth group activity that day. That's why he was at the store. And witnesses didn't seem to know like of any argument that would have caused it. People are like, we didn't hear people yelling or fighting that might like escalate this. And it was actually directly across the street from a police station. So the first few officers on the scene were actually ones who'd like heard it from inside the station. But police have no leads. They're like, we have no idea where this gunshot came from, what happened, what caused it. There's no obvious reason for the shooting. It was shot from a rifle, and this was pretty rare in Montgomery County, Maryland. Then on October 3rd at 7:41 a.m., a 911 call came in about someone having been shot. So 39-year-old Sonny Buchanan was a landscaper who was mowing lawns early in Rockville, Maryland. He had just recently relocated to Maryland to concentrate on the family's Christmas tree farm. He also still did landscaping, and he spent numerous hours at the Boys and Girls Club teaching kids how to plant a seed and nurture it. He had been shot and was bleeding badly, and he unfortunately died from the wound. And they thought it was possible to be connected to the shooting the night before because the two crime scenes were just over 4 miles apart. So they were pretty close to each other. So 30 minutes later at 8:21 a.m., 54-year-old Prem Kumar Walikar was a taxi driver filling up at a gas station in Aspen Hills, Maryland when he was shot. So Prem had immigrated to the area for college from India, and he would regularly send money back to help his siblings to be able to immigrate to the US as well. He had retired from a magazine business and worked part-time as a cab driver, and he was actually planning on like fully retiring soon and returning to India. He had a son and a daughter. And at the time, Caroline Namrao was also pumping gas, and she was an emergency room doctor. So she starts performing CPR on him, but he was already dead. Police show up, and they're all wearing bulletproof vests. And Caroline was like, it was a little unnerving because it was kind of like, can you get me one of those? I guess. Like,
Yeah,
what's
right?
happening? Then at 8:37 a.m. at the Leisure World Shopping Mall, less than 2 miles away in Norbeck, Maryland, 34-year-old babysitter and housekeeper Sarah Ramos was found dead. Sarah and her husband had immigrated from El Salvador for a better life. They had one son. She was a very private person, but was described as cheerful and loving. Passerbys actually thought it was a death by suicide because she was just kind of found on this bench, like unresponsive, but this was a part of the sniper attacks. And this is now three fatal shootings in less than an hour in a 4 mile radius. So, very scary for people living in this area.
Yeah, definitely.
And then at 9:58 a.m., 5.5 miles away, 25-year-old Lori Ann Lewis Rivera was using a self-service vacuum at a gas station in Kensington, Maryland, and was shot and killed. So Lori had received training to be a professional nanny, and she was working for a journalist in Northern Virginia, kind of being like a full-time nanny for that family. And she had married a Honduran immigrant, and they had one daughter. The snipers then went quiet for the next 12 hours. And then at 9:20 p.m. the same day, so they kind of took 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. off and then came back, there was another shot. 72-year-old Pascal Charlotte was a retired carpenter, and he was walking on Georgia Avenue in Washington, D.C. when he was shot and killed. His wife had dementia, and he spent most of his time taking care of her. And then he would kind of take a break to like walk around the neighborhood to kind of just clear his head. They did have 5 children together, and he had a garden and was known as a handyman. He would frequently help his neighbors with projects. And he was on one of his walks when he was shot by the DC snipers. So at that time, Montgomery County, Maryland averaged 20 homicides a year, and they'd had 4 in the span of a 16-hour period, and a fifth not too far away.
Ugh, goodness.
So a lot happening in this pretty small county. So the victim profile was also pretty confusing to police because there were both male and female, as well as multiple races. So there was, a white victim, a black victim, an Asian victim, a Hispanic victim. Like, there's no, a lot of times with serial killers, we see a profile, but this is just random targets. This is all across the board. So on October 4th, a massive manhunt was underway. This was huge in the news, but they really had no clues as to who this was or what was happening, and the only common denominator was that it was a single loud shot. They had run ballistics and found more details about the caliber. It was a 223, 223. How do you say that? How do gun people say that?
I
A
think
223?
223, but I'm not positive. Clearly, we're not
Me
gun
either.
people, but
Not a gun person. And they determined they were all from the same gun. They determined that this was not a high angle shot. So they were likely shooting from like a bench or a platform, kind of like in a van or a truck. And they do believe this was the work of like a highly motivated sniper. Each person was shot with only one shot. So this, whoever this is pretty accurate and very highly motivated, like with their shootings, because it's only one shot and they're, you know, so at 2:30 p.m. on October 4th in Fredericksburg, Virginia, 43-year-old mother of two, Caroline Sewell, is shot outside of another Michael's craft store. This was more than 50 miles from the original cluster of shootings, and she's the first victim to survive. So this is now a public safety issue. They've also way widened their range there. And the only real clue they had was they had one witness who said they saw a white truck or van fleeing from one of the scenes. They said it had like kind of like two lines of block lettering on the side. It had six wheels. So now the media is saying like this is a white box truck with two people in it, and like groupthink just took over. Everyone was reporting any like white box truck, any white van, anything to the police. And if you think about it, especially during work hours, a white van is pretty common.
yeah, definitely.
It was reported possibly around this time that every eighth car on the road was a white van. Like it's is something you're gonna see a lot. And so tips just started flowing in basically about any white van anybody saw. And actually many women like called in saying like my husband is scary, my husband is abusive, he has lots of guns. They're going to check it out and they're like, yeah, your husband sucks, but doesn't look like he's the sniper. Like they're kind of seeing all these calls come in and be like, yeah, we have a lot of possible suspects, but none of them are it so
Yeah.
far. So kind of instead of dealing with like no information, which is what we usually see, they have too much information, which
Which can
is
be
kind of
just as hard. Like,
especially when you have like all these tips coming in that you're like, how do you even have the manpower to like follow up on all of these?
especially in such a populated area like Northern Virginia,
Yeah.
DC, Maryland, like there's a ton of people in those areas.
Yeah. So, DC police were also investigating one of the shootings that was just inside the DC line, and there was a report of a Chevy Caprice leaving the scene, but that was kind of buried in the news coverage. And a lot of news coverage was now having, quote, experts come on who were talking about this victim profile that they had no basis of. And everyone is saying it is a white guy that fits the stereotypical, like, serial killer prototype. They're like describing this man. It's a white man in a white van. This is what's happening. So, not helping the media coverage on this case to have these people come in. So, the police soon realized it was likely that the shooter was watching their press conferences that they were holding daily. So, they said one day that the shooter did not seem to be targeting schools, so the schools would open. And then on October 7th at 8:09 a.m., a 13-year-old boy, Iron Brown, was shot and wounded in Bowie, Maryland at Benjamin Tasker Middle School. He was critically injured, but he did survive. And this shooting was 70 miles from the previous shooting in Fredericksburg. So again, Sniper Zone is growing and they're back in Maryland. Kind of a lot going on. Now they're targeting a school. Witnesses again reported seeing a white van leaving the scene. However, police discovered that the shot came from the adjacent woods. So, police also find two pieces of evidence: a single spent shell casing and a tarot card, more specifically, the death card, that said, Mr. Police, call me God, do not release to the press. And you're wrong about was kind of like making not a joke about this, but about the people who left like this tarot card, because I guess the death card is not actually that bad. Like it's not the card that if you're being like invoking fear, the
Mm-hmm.
death card is just kind of like the end of a situation. It's not like, kind of just poking fun at the basicness of being like, we're gonna use the death card. Like, okay, like,
Like probably someone who doesn't know what they're talking about or what
yeah,
that is or yeah.
yeah. And this was also confirming he was listening to the press conference as well, because in one before, one of the officers said, I don't know why in God's earth someone would do something like this. So then he's kind of speaking to that police officer who was speaking in the press conference. So even though the card said, please do not release to the media, the tarot card was leaked on October 9th, and law enforcement is extremely upset about this, as you can imagine, because, I mean, your sniper has one request, and the media just blows right through that. And then on October 9th at 8:18 p.m. in Manassas, Virginia, 53-year-old Dean Myers, who's a civil engineer, was shot at a gas station. Myers had enlisted in the Army and served in South Vietnam, and he actually had a Purple Heart for wounds like he received like during his service. He loved the outdoors and donated to World Vision, which was an anti-poverty mission. So police officers interview potential witnesses in a parking lot across the street, and one is a man driving a 12-year-old Chevy Caprice, just like the one spotted near the DC murder scene, but they just kind of talked to him, let him go, and didn't really realize the significance of this until later, but it comes back.
I was gonna say, Courtney, I feel like this Chevy Caprice might come back. It's been mentioned twice now.
Yeah, don't let the white vans lead you astray.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people were terrified, understandably so. I mean, this is terrifying. They would sprint into grocery stores. They would duck down when pumping gas because quite a few people have been shot like at gas stations. So some gas stations even put up tarps so they couldn't see people like when pumping gas. Like you pulled in and you
Wow.
couldn't be seen from the road.
Yeah.
People would like zigzag through parking lots, like when they're running inside. Parents wouldn't take their children to parks or let them play outside the house. Like Carolyn from Prim's shooting, like said, she was like, I wouldn't let my kids play outside at all because I was like, I don't know what's going to happen out there. Parents would also escort kids into school. They kind of made like a human shield around the kids, like, and a lot of people signed up to do this to kind of help kids get into the school. On October 11th at 9:40 a.m., 53-year-old Kenneth Bridges was a businessman and prominent social activist from Philadelphia, and he was shot in the head at a gas station in Spotsylvania, Virginia. So Kenneth was born in Detroit, and he worked as an executive at Scott Paper Company. He was the co-founder and president of MATAH Network, which was an organization formed to encourage Black citizens to support Black-owned businesses. And he was married and had 6 children. And a cop was actually like near this shooting, just like on a routine traffic stop. And after he heard the shot, he also started looking for a white van. Since it had been so heavily reported, he was like, well, let me go look for a white van and like take that information down. So police are realizing that like a lot of these places where the shootings occur are near interstates. So after this shooting, they started doing roadblocks on the interstate, and they were just trying to pull out like all the stops they could think of, like to try and catch the sniper. And again, a dark blue Chevy Caprice was stopped. However, they were given a pass. This car was legally registered. There were no warrants out on it, nothing like that. But this car, however, has now been seen at least 3 crime scenes.
And as we mentioned at the beginning, I'm getting over a cough and a cold, so please bear with me. Hopefully this goes okay. And my future apologies to Courtney, who is editing this episode. Great timing.
Great timing.
On October 14th at 9:15 p.m. in Falls Church, Virginia, 47-year-old Linda Franklin was shot in the chest at a Home Depot parking lot. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Her and her husband were loading things into the back of their car. Linda was an FBI analyst and was also a breast cancer survivor, and she had a grown son and daughter and was expecting her first grandchild. So this was the first shooting in Fairfax County, Virginia, and is 50 miles from the last shooting in Spotsylvania. Another witness is claiming to have seen the shooter leave the scene in a white van. It was found to not be credible, but again, the damage was already done. And again, their tip line is just flooded with people seeing white vans. Another person had reported seeing a dark-colored Caprice at the scene, but by the time that they figured, but at that time they figured the tip was not credible, so they just moved on and didn't really investigate it because they're focused on this white van. So at this time, the snipers were calling the task force, the Rockville City Police, and the Montgomery County Police. And in one call, they said that they had called 3 times to set up negotiations and have not gotten a response, and that people have died, and that lady that didn't have to die. On October 19th at 8 p.m. in Ashland, Virginia, 37-year-old Jeffrey Hopper was shot outside the Ponderosa Steakhouse. He survived, and again, people reported seeing a white van leaving the area. And in the woods, they found the 223 caliber shell casing and another note from the snipers. It was a 4-page ransom letter. They asked for $10 million in a bank account, and they referenced the tarot card and said, P.S. Your children are not safe anywhere at any time. On October 22nd at 5:55 a.m. in Aspen Hill, Maryland, 35-year-old Conrad or C.J. Johnson, who was a Montgomery County bus driver, was shot and killed at his first stop. He was also a Jamaican immigrant, and he had 2 sons and coached basketball at the Fort Washington Boys and Girls Club. He was a prankster but would help anyone in need, and the shot seemed to have come from the wood line. So police find another note in the woods, and the note said, "Your incompetence has cost you another life." So they're just taunting the police, the community, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And the snipers then started calling the police a lot. And at one point, they tell them to look at a shooting at a liquor store in Montgomery, Alabama from September 21st, 2002. So they're trying to use this as like their credentials to prove that like they are in fact the DC snipers and not someone that's just calling to fuck with police.
Mm-hmm.
So the police called the Montgomery Police Department and asked about this shooting. They said 1 person was killed and 1 person was injured, and the only evidence they had were fingerprints. So they had run them against the national database and immigration records, and they were linked to a 17-year-old boy named Lee Boyd Malvo. And then around the same time, police get a call from Tacoma, Washington, saying that they need to look into 2 men, this Malvo, and also a 41-year-old named John Allen Muhammad. So the person calling said Malvo's nickname in Tacoma was Sniper. And the tipster said that they had practiced shooting in his backyard. So they sent field agents to retrieve the stump, and they tried to like keep all this quiet, but of course the media quickly showed up and, started reporting on what was happening. There was no hiding this. On October 23rd, another police conference was held saying that they had issued a federal warrant for John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo. A few hours later, they were arrested outside Frederick, Maryland, and soon it was discovered that the media experts were very wrong. There was no white box truck, and the suspects were also not white. John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo were paired together in an unlikely circumstance. Muhammad was 41 years old and was the alpha, and like we said, Malvo was only 17 and was a devout follower of Muhammad, and he referred to him as Dad. So John Allen Williams, who would later change to Muhammad, was born on December 31st, 1960, and grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. His mother was from Antigua and died when he was young from cancer. He said that he was 5, but other family members say he was like around 2. Either way, obviously very young. He was very close with his mom, and there were even reports that she died with him in her arms. And the children then moved into their grandparents' 3-bedroom house with 20 other people. So quite a lot of people in this home. That's a lot
of people. I have a 3-bedroom house now, and I'm like 20 people in here.
Right.
That's too many.
Yeah, that's tight. Muhammad said that they were beaten, that they were not told their birthdays until they were a certain age. He said his uncle constantly attacked him, and this uncle was actually later found guilty of beating a child to death as a guard at a reform school. So, might be some truth to that. He met a woman named Mildred, and on their first date, he said he wanted someone to spend his life with and be serious with, and Mildred felt that way as well, so their relationship became serious and intense very quickly. However, Muhammad was married to a woman named Carol at this time, and he had 2 sons from 2 different women. So Mildred asked him about this, and he said that his marriage was breaking up, and Mildred was the one for him. He said him and Carol were only together for their son, and Mildred learns that Muhammad does not know how to read, and so she taught him. And Mildred helping him learn to read helps him get into the army. So he becomes stationed at Fort Lewis in Tacoma, Washington. And at this point, Mildred breaks up with him. But a month later, Muhammad writes to Mildred and said that he wants to leave his wife for her and wants to be with her. And he also includes a one-way ticket to Washington in this letter, and Mildred moves to Tacoma to be with him. While in the army, Muhammad does receive the normal marksmanship training, but it doesn't seem like he got anything too specialized after that. He was more interested in cars, engines, and explosives. He liked taking things apart, seeing how they worked, putting them back together, and he was very good at his job. Muhammad and Mildred got married in a private small ceremony in 1988, and then Mildred got pregnant in 1989. So around this time, Mildred also found out that Muhammad had been having an affair with a 19-year-old named Danielle for about 6 months. So Mildred actually picked Danielle up and brought her to the house to confront Muhammad together, and Muhammad tries to deny it the whole time, but Mildred and Danielle both say, like, you have to choose, and so Muhammad chooses Mildred. They did have a few rocky weeks, but they tried to fix the relationship, and then they just don't speak about the affair again.
Which, like, can you imagine your wife bringing your mistress into the house and then trying to be like, that didn't happen.
Right. Like,
I'm not
okay.
doing that. It's like,
Nope.
literally, she's in the kitchen.
Right.
What do you mean?
It's
It's
like,
right here.
I've never
And
seen that woman.
that's just, that's just Muhammad. He's a wild one, man.
Yeah, definitely. So they eventually get stationed in Germany. They live on the base there, and their son is born, and they call him Little John. And in 1990, Muhammad goes to the first Iraq War. He comes home completely different after this. He can't sleep. He's like angry at Mildred, the military. Mildred said that it was like his spirit had been broken and that he was a broken man. Muhammad explains to Mildred that he was experiencing racism overseas in a very real way. He said that Black soldiers were not being treated the same. They were being passed over for promotions, and he felt belittled. He said that he tried to file a complaint about it, and the same day, suddenly in the middle of the night, there's an explosion, and he's stuck in his sleeping bag. So Muhammad says the other soldiers accused Muhammad of doing it. They hogtied him and left him in a basement without food or water and basically tortured him over this incident. However, Muhammad cannot kind of be fully trusted in his recounting of this situation. Mildred tried to go with him to talk to a commanding officer about it, and she found out that there was like a whole investigation, that he refused to cooperate, would not talk to investigators, and later it would come out that a commanding officer believed Muhammad was trying to kill himself, and that's why he refused to cooperate. But there is no documentation of that in his military record, which we would hope that they would send him to, a psych ward or discharge him if like he almost killed all of these other soldiers. So probably a little bit of both, a little bit of truth in both sides to this story.
Hmm.
I'm sure the military did and still does have a lot of racism and issues around that, but Muhammad was also probably not completely innocent in this situation either.
Yeah, just kind of like, Mildred like really worked with him and was like, okay, like let's go talk to someone. And then
Uh-huh.
she's like talking to the office, like commanding officer who's like, we tried. He won't
Yeah.
talk to us. And then she's like, What?
Yeah.
What do you like? It's yeah.
So, around this time as well, Muhammad and Mildred discover the religion of Islam. Both of them start to follow it, and Mildred especially just like loves the ideas and teachings of Islam. And they also have a second child who they named Selena. So, after Selena is born, Mildred had some complications and had to go back to the hospital, and Muhammad was just not very kind to her during this time. And in 1992, they moved back to the United States and were living in California. And in 1993, their third child, Taliba, was born. So they then get transferred back to Tacoma, Washington. And in 1994, Muhammad was honorably discharged, and there's really nothing else to that. He just served his time there and left. So after his time in the military, he became a mobile car mechanic. So he would drive around and go to people to fix their cars. And Mildred became the secretary of this business and like handled all the business aspect. They were actually pretty successful, but Muhammad was bad about just like keeping the money he was paid and not telling Mildred how much he earned each day and not, just kind of
Yeah.
being a little shady about the money he's getting.
Hmm.
Then later on, Muhammad's other son, Lindbergh, comes to stay with them, but Muhammad says that he isn't leaving because he's being abused at home and he tries to sue for custody, but it didn't work. He was supposed to fly home, but he was about to run away with Lindbergh, and Mildred stayed in the room with him until he could get on the flight. And Lindbergh later testified in one of the trials that his father actually convinced him that he was being abused. And it took him 6 months after he got home to his non-abusive mother to realize that that was not true, that he was just putting that in his head that his mother was not actually abusing him.
Yeah, and that's like just a common thread with Muhammad is just like gaslighting people basically and then like convincing them like Lindbergh is like, "Wow, you're right. My mom is abusive. I don't need to go home to her." And like
Yeah,
thankfully Mildred stepped in and was like got him on that flight home and then like it took him 6 months to be like, "Oh, my mom's not abusive," which is like
yeah,
the damage he did like to Carol and her relationship with her son. Like
yeah.
so Muhammad was very abusive toward Mildred their entire marriage. However, Muhammad eventually tells Mildred that he wants a divorce. So Mildred was kind of disappointed, but then she kind of thought on it and decided it was for the best. Like kind of they talk about in like the You're Wrong About podcast how like she got really into the followings of like Islam and in that it's a lot of like the man is the provider and the man provides for the wife and provides for the kids and she's like he's really not doing that. So maybe this is for the best because he's not really following like these teachings and all of this. So she's like, okay, I think I can get on board. And then she comes home and he's like, I was just kidding and like gaslights her and it's like, what do you mean? I never said that. Like, yeah. But after a few weeks, Mildred's like, you know what? You need to move out. And he does. They did try to go to therapy together, but then the therapist they were seeing started dating Muhammad a few months later.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah. So Muhammad was being very hostile during the separation. He one time looked at her and said, "You're my enemy now, and I will kill you." So Mildred was sick of it at this point, and a judge actually granted her a lifetime restraining order against him, which is very rare,
Wow, yeah, definitely.
but that's kind of how bad it was. So they decided to let Muhammad see the kids every other weekend. The first weekend went well, and the second weekend he was being kind of like wishy-washy and like he didn't bring the kids back. And at this point, like it's been a week and he's still not bringing them back, and so she calls the cops. But this isn't technically kidnapping because they didn't have like a written down parenting agreement that was like he's supposed to bring them back after X amount of time. So they technically couldn't do anything based on this because there was no written down agreement. So eventually, Muhammad calls her and threatens to kill her. So now, kind of, the cops and everyone kind of start to take her a little bit more seriously about like trying to help her. But Muhammad at this point flies with the kids to Antigua. So he's completely out of the country, and there's really nothing anyone can do about it. He does start a business selling people like papers that can help them like migrate to the United States, like kind of sells them like false identification papers that allow them to get into the US. And this is where he meets Lee Malvo. So Lee Boyd Malvo had a horrific childhood basically. He was born on February 18th, 1985 in Jamaica, and his father, Leslie, was actually not the abuser, but his mother, Una, was very abusive. A cousin remembers Una beating him when he wasn't even 6 years old, and she was hitting him all over his body with a belt, and his nose was bleeding, and she just didn't stop. To like a 6-year-old. Like, imagine a 6 year
Mm,
old. That is
I'm
a
so
baby.
sad. Yeah.
And Una was just really unreliable and would just like randomly be violent. Like one time Malvo was like, I kind of want to be an artist. And she was like, that's a great idea. And she buys him paper and pencils. And then a couple days later, she comes home and she's like, that's so stupid. You should be a doctor. And she takes all of it and just throws it away. So just this like, you never know what you're going to get, kind of. So Leslie was very nice. That's his father. He would take him out to play and get ice cream, but he would never really like take Malvo on like full time or kind of save him from this abusive mother either. And by the time Malvo is 6, his parents have split up, and Leslie got a job in the Cayman Islands, so he's spending more time away. Malvo loves the holidays because that's when he gets to see his dad. And this made Una angry, and she would like slap him if he said out loud how much he missed his father. And Malvo's only friend was a stray cat who one time wet the bed inside. And Una beat Malvo and said if she didn't get rid of the cat, she would just keep beating him. And so like Malvo had to try and like get the cat to not come around anymore to protect himself. And it was the saddest story I've ever heard, where it's
Hmm.
like the cat would keep coming around and he'd have to like hit it with a broom and be like, go away. Cause it's like if the
No.
cat came back, then Malvo would get beat. And this was like his one companion.
Yeah.
So Una gets a job in St. Martin that's a higher paying job, and it is about a 2 hour flight away. So she convinces a neighbor to watch Malvo and says she'll send money back. And then after a couple months, the money stops coming, and usually then the people who he's staying with would abuse Malvo or make him work for the money. And this was kind of like a common trend. Like somebody would take him in, the money would come, the money would stop, they would start taking it out on Malvo, like kind of just this cycle of it keeps happening. And Malvo was also bullied by other kids and beaten by multiple caretakers in his life. Malvo was a great student and actually very intelligent, like despite his troubled personal life. And Una eventually puts him in a boarding school, but he did struggle a bit there, just kind of like he didn't know anyone. He's kind of isolated. It's not really a great environment for him. So then Una gets deported from St. Martin and goes back to Jamaica. So she takes him out of the boarding school and they get a new house in Jamaica, which again, it's like she just keeps like slinging him around places. It's like you can't form any connection with someone when you're constantly moving schools. Like you're just it's really
Yeah.
it's really sucky. So they get a new house in Jamaica, and at this point, Malvo got a girlfriend. It was a very like innocent relationship, but Una found out and got so mad that she beat him with a belt until he was unconscious. So at this point, Malvo just kind of started disassociating a lot. Una was so inconsistent and abusive verbally and physically, and he would just kind of mimic the emotions of other and match like their emotions. Like people were later interviewed and they were like, you never knew his like true feelings. Like if somebody was like angry about something, like he would join in that anger, or if like they were really happy, like he would match that happy. Like he was kind of just because his mom was so unpredictable, just learning to like match other people's energy. Like, I'm just going to follow along because that's the safest bet right now. So now Una leaves for Antigua to try and work, and Malvo moves there with his mother. And after Malvo moves there, Una moves back to St. Martin and just leaves Malvo alone in a house with no money, and Una stops paying the bills. And
My God.
he's only 14. Like, you're leaving a
Yeah.
14-year-old just on their own. So he's trying
Ugh.
to like sell odd things to make some money because he's like, well, I gotta sleep somewhere. I don't really know what else to do. And then Una eventually moves back to Antigua and they move in with another man who's trying to help them start a business. Una is now starting to want to move to the United States and she hears that Muhammad can get her papers. So Una and Malvo go over to Muhammad's. Muhammad sets Una up with the papers. And after this, Malvo starts to go over to Muhammad's house a lot more to like just hang out. So Una then suddenly moves to Florida. Again, flight risk over here. She's just out, just leaving all the time. And Malvo keeps hanging out with Muhammad and they start bonding. Muhammad tries to relate to Malvo, saying, like, I also had an abusive childhood. They just kind of immediately start bonding and calling each other like father and son. And Malvo's helping take care of the kids as well. And Muhammad eventually gets arrested in Antigua because he's not very good at his like getting people papers job. Like basically he would like book flights in his name. He would get the boarding pass and then just put the like hand it to the person and put them on the
Mm.
plane.
Oh,
So
okay.
like yeah. So then one day this flight attendant was like, "Oh, like Muhammad's on the plane. That's cool. I know him. He's sitting in, I don't know, 11A, whatever. I don't know where he was sitting, just somewhere." And like she walks up and it's just like a random lady sitting there and she's like, um, what's she doing?
And this was
So,
definitely pre 9/11, as you can tell from the
yeah. Yeah.
situation.
So, yeah. So he does spend 2 weeks in jail and escapes by just walking out one day. Just walked on out. And around this time's when Muhammad changes his last name from like Williams to Muhammad. I just called him Muhammad the whole way through because I think it just makes it more simple than switching names on you halfway through. But this is around the time he just changed his last name. And Malvo's still kind of helping take care of the kids around this time. So Malvo flies to Florida and Muhammad goes back to Washington. And Muhammad had enrolled his children under different fake names. And a few red flags kind of start popping up. And the kids are asked at school if those are their real names and they start crying. Basically, like they're like, "What's your name?" They say the fake names and they're like, "Is that your real name?" And they all just start crying.
Ugh.
So CPS does get involved and they find Mildred and Mildred like gets the phone call of like, "Hi, we finally found your children," which I'm sure was
Ugh, gosh.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Mildred at this point had moved with her sister to Clinton, Maryland, and that's when she gets the call. They found her children. And it had been 18 months at this point that she hadn't seen her children.
Oh, that's so
Can you
sad.
imagine? Can you imagine like Andrew just like running away with your kids and for like 18 months you have no idea where they are, if they're alive, like nothing.
That's horrific.
Yeah. After you finally get out of this abusive relationship with your ex, like it's Mildred like breaks my heart in this because she's like such a victim over and over and over again. So they go to court about the custody battle. Muhammad tried to pretend that Mildred always knew where they were, and she asked him to take the kids. He was like, she knew where we were the whole time. She didn't want them. Just this whole spew of lies. Judge didn't buy it, and he awarded custody to Mildred. And Muhammad was very upset about this. He also now goes to Una and is asking for Malvo to live with him. And Una is like, no, I don't really like that. I don't want you to do that. No, thank you.
Oh,
So,
gosh.
yeah. So Malvo lives with Una in Fort Myers for about 6 months, and Muhammad and Malvo talk regularly on the phone. But Una kind of suddenly decides to become a mother and is like, no, you need to stay with me, not this random guy you met one time in Antigua. um, but in October 2001, Muhammad asked Malvo to come live with him, and Malvo agrees, like, because to him, Muhammad seems more stable than Una, and also, like, he promises to get him into college. So he's like, I think this is a better life. So he's just kind of, okay, I'll go with you. So Muhammad was actually around this time also reported to the FBI multiple times. Because again, this is October 2001, month after the 9/11 attacks. If you're from a different country, the September 11th, 2001 attacks when they hit the Twin Towers in New York City, as well as the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. And he'd been heard like defending the 9/11 hijackers, which is not what you want to do around this time.
Oh, no, nope.
Nope, nope. And I do think I remember too, like talking about 9/11, other stories, like people would call in, like if anyone was even
Yeah.
like, of the religion of Islam, they were like calling in, being like, this is whatever. But like this guy's actually like defending them. So they were like,
Yeah.
and he also was talking about revenge on Mildred. And Malvo also talks about wanting to go to flight school. So they're like, this is not great that this guy's talking about defending the 9/11 hijackers, and then his little disciple here is about to go to flight school, but the FBI never followed up on it. And but as a reminder, October 2001, a month after, I'm sure the FBI is just like flooded with 9/11 related calls at this time. So Muhammad is now training Malvo like a soldier. He was forcing him to practice shooting. And Malvo was a little confused about this. He was like, why am I practicing this? And Muhammad's like, every black man needs to know how to defend himself. But like Muhammad would have him like shooting like pictures of himself. He's like, how am I defending myself when like I'm the target? I don't get it.
That's
Um,
odd.
yeah. And he was having Malvo go to sleep listening to books about war and revolution. And he was really just like brainwashing Malvo, forces him to only eat like one meal a day. They're like waking up and taking all these like nutritional supplements, and then they don't eat until like 6 p.m. Just like weird culty stuff. So eventually Una goes to Washington to find Malvo, and Malvo's not happy that she's there, but the Immigration and Naturalization Services, or the INS, are called and take Una. And they go to pick up Malvo, who's like with Muhammad at like this club they hang out, and Muhammad's like, I have no clue who that kid is. Malvo? Never heard of him. No clue. Literally just like throws him to the wolves, like, don't know who that kid is. Nope.
Wow.
No clue.
Wow. When you're supposedly like supposed to be taking care of and protecting this
Yeah,
boy.
you're calling him son, and then you're like, nope, no idea
Wow.
who he is. So they take Malvo to immigration detention and he gets fingerprinted, which is kind of how, as we said later in the story, he's kind of connected to all this. So Una has married a Haitian immigrant who was a US citizen. So she's waiting on her paperwork and it takes about a month, but they were like, you know what? You're right. You are married to a US citizen. You are both free to go. So Una decides like he should go back to Washington because he's like enrolled in like a school there, but like Una was also kind of living in Washington. Like she was living in like Bellingham or something. And I think Muhammad was living in like Tacoma, something like that, where they were living in like different cities. So she's like, all right, we'll go back where Malvo is like in school. And when they get back, Malvo runs away to go live with Muhammad again, even though he like threw him to the wolves. He's like returning to him. So now things start to get more intense. They're training harder, and some days they spend up to 12 hours at the shooting range. Muhammad will leave Malvo tied shirtless to a tree for up to 6 hours, even in the winter. And he said he was like learning his like toughness. He's like, I'm teaching you your toughness, whatever. Craziness, basically. And then in late January 2002, Muhammad ordered Malvo to kill someone. So they're in Bellingham, and Muhammad said he knows a manager at a restaurant and knows what time they leave and that they have money with them. So they pull up around midnight and wait. So she comes out around 1 a.m. She gets into her car, but then she realizes she forgot something in the restaurant and goes back. So Malvo's able to like run up to the car, grab the binder of money, and kind of get out. Doesn't have to kill anyone. And they actually got about $1,000. But Muhammad will then, like, after some of these crimes, like, debrief with Malvo and be like, great, you got the money. Can't believe you didn't kill her. Can't believe you didn't shoot her. So, like, debrief and, like, tell him, like, what he did wrong in these different shootings, kind of like it's a business meeting or something. So now they set their sights on Isa Nichols. So she had testified against Muhammad in the custody battle, and Muhammad's resentment has been growing. So on February 16th, Malvo ends up going to the door, and Isa's niece actually answered, and she was like, hey, Isa's not here. She's at the grocery store. Malvo then shoots the niece, Kenya Cook. And this case was actually not solved until later after the DC sniper shootings because Kenya had an abusive ex-boyfriend. So they actually thought the abusive ex-boyfriend was the one who came and like shot her, but it was actually Malvo under the instruction of Muhammad. So Muhammad was like, you did a really, really great job on that, and gave him a new ID that said John Lee Muhammad. And this actually did seem to really affect Malvo. Like, he had a hard time with this after killing Kenya. Like, he wasn't sleeping. He was like really kind of eaten up about it. Like, it did seem to affect him. Like, we'll kind of get into it, but like, Malvo is like so brainwashed, like cult mentality that it's like he's not really motivated to do this. He's just like being brainwashed into doing it.
Yeah.
You know, like
I mean, you
it's
have to look at
complicated.
how young he is and like the horrific
And
abuse that he went
his
through
life,
and
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, not obviously he had his part in this. You
Yeah.
know, he did do this, but you do also have to look at everything around this and how much Muhammad was like in his ear forcing him to do these things.
Yeah. So after this, they go to visit Muhammad's sister in Arizona and they go through LA. And Muhammad later said that he did kill someone in LA, but authorities have not connected him to any murders there. So maybe he did, but there's hasn't been anything that he's been officially linked to. On March 19th in Arizona, a man named Jerry Taylor is shot with a rifle from far away near a golf course. They then dragged him into the woods but didn't take his money or cards, and this is also believed to be connected to Muhammad and Malvo. So they now head back to Washington, and on the way, they stole the bus driver's cards. In June or July, they spent time in Louisiana and then returned back to Washington by August. And they had been just kind of jumping around, staying with various people in their houses. Everyone's kind of getting sick of him and his nonsense. So, it's time for you to just move on here.
Will you please stop sleeping on my couch?
Right. On September 5th, this may be the first sign that Muhammad and Malvo have come to the DC area because on this day, Paul LaRuffa was leaving his restaurant in Clinton, Maryland, which is where Mildred lives now, and he got in the car and then the driver's side window exploded. He called 911 and then the shooter grabbed his briefcase that had money and a laptop in it. And after this, they went to Camden, New Jersey to buy a car and then came back to Maryland. At this point, they were stalking Mildred to see where she went and who she visited, and they were there so much that some neighbors in the neighborhood actually reported it to the cops. On September 14th in Silver Spring, Maryland, Rupinder or Benny Oberio was closing a liquor store with another employee. They heard a loud boom and Oberio fell to the ground and he had been shot. A witness across the street thought they saw a dark Chevy car leaving the area, but this was ignored. And on September 15th in Brandywine, Maryland, Mohammed Rashid also worked for a liquor store and was closing up. And he saw a teenager walking towards him, and the teenager shot him in the stomach and stole his wallet. So Mohammed and Malvo then make their way south to Atlanta. In the early hours of September 21st, Milan Waldemariam was coming to help at a liquor store, Sammy's package store, and he noticed a car idling in the parking lot. He went outside and was shot, and he died 11 hours later at the hospital. His wallet was stolen too. On that same day, Muhammad and Malvo go to Montgomery, Alabama. Claudine Parker and Kelly Adams were leaving a liquor store after closing, and they heard two gunshots. Claudine was shot in the back, and it severed her spinal cord. It paralyzed her, and she had many fatal injuries. Kelly was also rushed to the hospital and underwent surgery and survived. And the police saw a man standing over the two women going through their purses, but the gunman got away. Kelly had to have about 30 surgeries and obviously had PTSD from this encounter. She had night terrors and just really struggled after this. And the police did find a gun magazine that had fallen out of the shooter's pocket, and they find a partial fingerprint on it.
And this is kind of the crime that they called in and were like, hey, check out this one and fingerprints. That's kind of how those all wrap back up in together.
On September 23rd, Hong Ballinger was the manager of a beauty shop in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and as she's getting into her car, she's shot by a rifle from far away. She was killed, and a coworker saw a dark blue vehicle driven by a black man leaving a vacant parking lot near some woods about 75 yards away. So the coworker saw the car pick up another black man who had Ballinger's purse. 3 days later, another man was shot at a grocery store and then they robbed him. And this is the last shooting that they also committed a robbery during. So by October 2nd, Mildred has filed multiple complaints against Muhammad and his abuse. And again, there's also the lifetime restraining order that was granted. So with all of the liquor store attacks, multiple people reported seeing a dark colored vehicle leaving the scene. Muhammad's plates were run 9 times during the shooting and during the shooting spree. And Muhammad was actually pulled over on October 3rd, which was the day that 5 shootings happened in one day, but nothing came of it.
Yeah, so it was
he's there.
Again, he's there. He's and they talk about it later where they were they love to go talk to the police too. They loved being able to interject themselves and they are getting pulled over at all these crime scenes and there's just they're not keeping track, I guess, with the cars they're stopping to be oh wait, 9 times.
Yeah.
Where their plates run because they're in the area.
Ugh. So the shooting of Iran Brown at the school, Muhammad had actually told Malvo to shoot 10 kids. He gave him 10 bullets and he said, come back when they're empty. And Malvo said that there were too many witnesses and that's why he didn't do it. Obviously, maybe he just chickened out, but those were his instructions from Muhammad. So now this is where we line up with the shootings. So Muhammad and Malvo were arrested on October 24th, 2002. Their vehicle, the 1990 Chevrolet Caprice, was impounded. And from the outside, it looked normal, but they had altered it where the back seat would lift up. So the gun was stored there, and then the shooter could crawl into the trunk. So it had darker than normal tinting on the back windows, and they had cut an opening above the license plate. So they could put the barrel of the gun in the hole, fire a shot, and no one could see where it was coming from. Like they're essentially hidden. And inside the car, they find ammunition, guns, violent video games, books such as The Art of War, numerous DVDs, music, including Bob Marley and Tupac, a laptop computer, a digital recorder, half of a $50 bill, and a Princeton Review CD. They later admitted that they would not flee from the scenes, that they would just like stay at the places and then go and talk to law enforcement. Again,
And
just
apparently it worked.
wild. Yeah. I was like, oh, you're around here, all these different ones. Okay, you must just hang out in the area. So the trial was moved to Virginia Beach, Virginia. They did choose Virginia for the first trials because they had the best history of using capital punishment. They had actually executed the most people right after Texas, and they were also one of the few states that allowed the execution of juveniles. So that's why they chose Virginia versus Maryland.
Which is crazy to me. If you had me guess like the top 5 states with executions, I don't know if Virginia would come to top of mind, but I guess, and I mean, 2002, they were still executing juveniles.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel
Crazy.
like
And
we've
like,
covered quite a few cases in Virginia that had someone executed. So,
yeah, that's true too. I mean, just last week
yep.
we had, but yeah, it was in the You're Wrong About podcast. It was really funny because the girl was like, they had Georgia and Alabama as far as people being murdered, and they chose Virginia, which is
Yeah.
not what you expect. Like,
That's
yeah,
true. Yeah. I was just thinking of Maryland and like those, like that most recent spree. But yeah, that's true. They also had other more
the
southern states that
Georgia,
they
like
could
the
have
Atlanta
picked.
shootings, the Montgomery,
Wow.
Alabama, and they're like, nope, Virginia. That's
Yeah, that's
our
the
best
one.
bet.
Wow. So Muhammad and Malvo were each charged with capital murder and for violating Virginia's new anti-terrorism law, which made it a capital offense to intimidate the public and coerce a government. And this was passed in the wake of the 9/11 attacks. So John Muhammad's trial began in October of 2003, and this is the longest in the history of Virginia, and it was 6 weeks long. Can't really find anything if there's been like a longer trial since then. So, not to say there hasn't been, but the Google search did not give any conclusive results.
Yeah, and like let me know if like y'all go and like search this and find something different. But anyway, I typed this into Google. It just kept giving me like the longest trial like in history ever.
Oh, interesting.
And I was like, I don't care about that. I want
Yeah,
Virginia. And they're like, oh, here's this one from California. I'm like, no, I
but that's
want
not what I'm
Virginia.
asking
And
for.
I could not find a definitive list anywhere. So if you happen to know off the top of your head or I don't know, spend more time, I was also like, this is not the hill I'm going to die on in the researching of this case. But
Yeah,
if that's the hill you want to die on and you find different stuff, let us know. We'll put a correction in the next
yes.
episode.
But at one time, it was the longest. So Muhammad's trial is a little problematic at times. So again, Muhammad made Malvo do all of the actual shootings, even though Muhammad like was the one persuading Malvo to do it. So he was not the one actually doing the shooting, but he was the one coercing, setting up, you know. And the prosecution leaned heavily on reminding the jury of the fear and terror that they felt during the DC sniper attacks. When talking to Malvo, they discovered that Malvo was told that the shootings were designed to create a society of 70 boys and 70 girls that Muhammad was going to be the lord of, and Malvo was going to be one of his soldiers. So again, like we said before, Malvo was just like so enamored with Muhammad that he like really believed what he was saying and was just so brainwashed and would do anything for him. In November of 2003, Muhammad was convicted of capital murder, terrorism, and illegal use of a firearm. The jury recommended the death penalty, and Muhammad was sentenced to death in March of 2004. He appealed his conviction a few times, but they were all very quickly denied. Lee Boyd Malvo's trial began shortly after Muhammad's, and Malvo tried to plead not guilty by reason of indoctrination. It did not work, and this exact plea has never worked. On December 18th of 2003, Malvo was convicted on 2 counts of capital murder, and he was sentenced to life without parole. Muhammad and Malvo both also had a trial in Maryland for those crimes, and they were both found guilty there too. So Muhammad has never really explained why he did this. It's mostly just a bunch of theories. Some people say he did it so he could kill his ex-wife and then like swoop in as the grieving ex-husband and be a hero to his kids, but police don't really agree with that. Mildred believes that it could be possible. She believes he was coming for her and trying to like cover it up. And she cites the Michaels shootings especially because she used to shop at Michaels and shop there before their wedding for their cake topper. So again, highly debated, but that is a theory. On November 10th, 2009, at 9:06 p.m., Muhammad was executed. His final meal was chicken with red sauce and strawberry cake, and he did not make a last statement. Mildred said she was trying to help her children deal with the loss of their father, and she said after they got confirmation of his execution, they all went to their rooms and cried. And Mildred said she felt some sense of peace knowing that the man who abused her for all those years was gone. And she has gone on to do a lot of advocacy work for domestic abuse. In 2012, the Supreme Court ruled that mandatory life sentences for juveniles was unconstitutional, so two federal courts found that Malvo was entitled to a new sentencing. The Virginia legislature also passed a law in 2020 that gave juvenile offenders an opportunity to seek parole after serving 20 years. And Malvo was also found guilty in Maryland, and Maryland's highest court ruled that he must be resentenced for his crimes there as well. He would be eligible for parole soon after this 2020 law. On September 16th, 2022, Malvo was denied parole in Virginia, and in March 2024, he was in court again to try and determine when he would be sent to Maryland for resentencing there, but we have not seen any further updates since then. He was serving time in Red Onion State Prison, but was transferred to Keene Mountain Correctional Center in June of 2024, and that is a lower security prison. In March of 2020, Malvo married in a prison ceremony, and Malvo has called multiple victims' families and apologized. So, as we know, this is a very tricky case because Malvo was the shooter in these horrific crimes, but he was also very clearly abused his entire life, was very brainwashed by Muhammad. Just a
It's just
lot.
so difficult because it's like he is the one who was the shooter and caused this
Uh-huh.
destruction in so many people's lives, but it's also like he is at the same time showing remorse and kind of being
Yeah.
like apologizing, which I'm sure does go a long way. I mean, it doesn't bring your loved one back, but like to at least hear them apologize has to help a little bit, but like it's such a fuck up situation because he was 17. He was just a
Yeah.
kid, but also it's just it's messy, but like ugh, it's just a tough one.
Yeah, it really is.
So these were the murders of Kenya Cook, Jerry Taylor, Million Waldemaram, Claudine Parker, Hong Ballinger, James Martin, James Buchanan, Prim Kumar Walikar, Sarah Ramos, Lori Ann Lewis Riviera, Pascal Sherratt, Dean Harold Myers, Kenneth Bridges, Lindra Franklin, and Conrad Johnson, and also the attempted murders of John Gietta, Paula Ruffa, Benny Oberio, Muhammad Rashid, Kelly Adams, Caroline Sewell, Iran Brown, and Jeffrey Hopper, which is a lot of people. That's a lot of
Ugh,
names.
yeah, just such a horrific case. And like, I knew about the DC snipers and I knew about the attacks in like Virginia and Maryland, but I didn't realize that they had also been in other parts of the country prior to that.
hmm I definitely didn't know the extent
Yeah,
of this case. I knew, like, I'd heard of the DC snipers, but like, I couldn't have told you like who it was. Like, I didn't
no.
know at all, like, who did it, why they did it, what
Hmm.
all happened. Just kind of there was like a sniper kind of thing.
Yeah,
Um, just a really tragic one though. Just really,
it really is.
really sad on all in all ways, basically.
And I feel like there's never really a motive with like these mass shootings, but
hmm
like what for what fucking reason, you know?
Yeah, because it's like, is it because he wants this society where he's Lord? Is it because he's trying to like cover up killing Mildred so he can get, you know, custody of his kids back? Is it just because he's like mad at the world and just wants to
Yeah.
cause havoc? Like there's no way to know like why.
Yeah. Yeah, just so sad. Um, Yeah, so we started out sad. We kept getting
Hmm.
sad. Courtney, what's your perk of the week to try to let us leave here on a high note today?
So, my part of the week is that I'm just very happy. It's like fall and like football season. It's still kind of
Hmm.
hot, but it's fall in my heart.
We've had a few
And
mornings in the 50s and
hmm
stepping outside to that like brisk air,
so
glorious.
nice. It just feels like fall, like football's back on. Like this was the first week of like actual football and kind of
Hmm.
like just football rituals and
Yep.
it's just so nice to be back. It's such a fun season. It's like my favorite time of the year. Like I love
Yeah.
the football games, I love the weather, I love the food. I love all of it. So
Yes.
that's my perk of the week because I'm just sick of sweating, y'all. I don't want to sweat
Same.
anymore.
Same.
Ugh, I don't want to sweat anymore. But
My dad was here yesterday and was complaining that it was too cold. And I was like, sorry, Dad, you got to get a jacket. I got like 50% extra blood volume over here. We hot all the time. I'm not.
yeah,
Like,
no,
bundle
please
up.
don't ever complain about being cold in my house. Just bring a jacket.
Yep.
It's gonna be cold in here. Um, but yeah, that is my perk of the week. Jacqueline, what is your perk of the week?
My perk of the week was also that football is back. Because again, same reasons, just all the fun traditions and we the Bengals were not off to a great start this week, but
I
you know.
I was very, very upset because we have a Survivor League and I
Uh-huh.
picked them because I was like, I mean, Joe Burrow's only healthy week one, so hopefully he
Exactly.
can close out this win. Nope.
Nope, nope, nope. Which is funny too because, of course, Andrew was in a horrible mood after that. And then I was like, but on the bright side, I was like, how many people had a loss this week in the survival pool because we were the biggest,
Quite a
um,
few.
supposed to have what word am I trying to say? But
Biggest spread,
there
yeah.
we go. Yes.
Um,
But yeah, but all the fun, traditions and just getting back into those and also we're having a baby in the fall and now it's like, oh shit, it's fall and we're
yeah.
having a baby real soon.
It's
So
coming
it's
soon. It's gonna be here before we know it. Because I was literally like talking to like one of my employees today, and I was like, "It's already 10 days into September."
I know. I know. Like we just started September and now it's halfway
I
over. I don't understand. By the
don't
time you guys are hearing
understand.
this, it's what, October almost? Like,
Should be the 24th, last weekend of September
oh,
by the time you hear this.
wow.
It's wild. Time is wild.
Yes.
But yeah.
But yeah, that was my perk of the week. Like I said, I've been sick this week. I stayed home all weekend, which I guess was also kind of its own perk of the week. Just
Hmm.
for once, for the first time in probably literally months that I haven't gone anywhere on a
Yeah.
weekend and just, you know,
It's always
got to chill at
nice.
home. Yeah. Let us know your thoughts on this case. Let us know how your football teams are doing and, your fantasy football teams and your survivor pools and all
Hmm.
your fun things that you're doing for the
Yeah.
fall. Um, have you had anything pumpkin yet? Are you excited for pumpkin? Do you like pumpkin? Are you not a pumpkin person?
Hmm.
You guys know where to
Let us
find
know.
us on all the things. We're in the show notes. You can just Google us. We show up everywhere there too. We're also on patreon.com/caffeinated crimes, where you can find monthly bonus episodes. We have some other fun perks. We have stickers, pins, some unedited video episodes, and just, ad-free episodes. So when we do
Hmm.
have ads, you get ad-free episodes. You get all of our two-parters same day. So if you don't want to wait a week in between. Just, and you get to support us, and
Hmm.
that's what we love about you. So thanks.
Yeah. And if you wouldn't mind to give us 5 stars on Apple Podcast, on Spotify, anywhere that has some kind of rating system where you can just be like, hi, yay, good job. Um, we're also on YouTube if you want to like, subscribe, follow. No, I think it's just subscribe. I don't know. Leave a
We
nice
don't know how
comment.
that works.
I don't know. Leave a nice comment. Any of those fun things. But in the meantime, go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.